Welcome to Better Than We Found It, the podcast for leaders driven to leave a positive mark through their leadership.
I hope that I will have created some ways in which the circumstances of your birth don't predict the opportunities you have in your life.
I'm Josh Huggins, your host and the founder of GS2 Partnership, a search firm committed to connecting visionaries dedicated to environmental and social betterment.
I have two young sons. I want to be able to tell them I did use the resources and expertise of the company to try to create more awareness about climate change.
In each episode, we delve into the minds of executive and future leaders. We discuss how sustainability guides responsible leadership, sparks change, and drives value.
The way of thinking I try and advocate is for us all to think about us having a collective problem to fix, which is climate, and that we need to rebuild our global economy.
We are GS2, and we are on a critical journey to connect to those who believe in leaving the world better than we found it. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Better Than We Found It. On today's show, I'm delighted to be joined by Isabel McAllister. Isabel is the Chief Sustainability and Compliance Officer at First Bus. Now, she's worked within sustainability and environment for her whole career. In fact, her degree was in environmental science and European environmental regulation back in the day. So she is a stalwart of the industry, someone who has been there, seen it and done it. Her career really started to take shape and explode at Mace, where she spent 10 years as the responsible business director, growing their sustainability function from something in its infancy through to an established, mature organisation and one of the market leaders within the built environment, through to transitioning from the built environment into the transport sector recently, joining First Bus. Within the episode, we discuss that career trajectory, what it was like for 20 years working in the built environment and how that transition came around, but also what does good look like from a sustainability perspective, how do you integrate it into the executive team, and most importantly, what does it look like in a forward-facing capacity and role. So if those things sound like they could be of interest to you, then please listen on and let's dive right in. So Isabel, welcome to Better Than We Found It.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Excellent. It's good to get you on, and really looking forward to the conversation today. So, for the audience that may not know who you are, would you please just give an introduction and overview of yourself and your current role and remit?
I have a long job title, which is Chief Sustainability and Compliance Officer at First Bus. So we are a large bus operator across UK and Ireland, and I look after a range of things, which clearly from the job title includes sustainability, but my big areas of busyness are decarbonising our fleet of 5,000 vehicles, and I also look after safety, construction and real estate, security, partnerships and environment.
Wow, well, it's good that not all of that is on the job title, otherwise it definitely wouldn't fit on a business card if, I suppose, the eco business card or virtual one that you might have. So really keen to understand a bit more. And I suppose where I always like to begin is the sort of origination story or the early years. So I remember you telling me that your academic background was in environmental science and environmental regulation. And I think that probably has laid a strong foundation for your career. But could you tell us more a bit about how that initial training and learning sort of paved the way for the career that you've had, and particularly how you transitioned out of that into the built environment?
So I think my academic learning was absolutely critical in the sense of understanding how the world works and working out what I was good at, bad at, what I enjoyed, what I always left to the bottom of my list of things to do. But I would say that in parallel to that, whilst I was learning at university, I had 101 weird jobs. So, and in parallel to doing academic studies, I did my best to earn as much money as I could, doing often not very typical things, to enjoy my best, some of my best years of my life through my studies. So I did 5 years of university. Wow. And in that time, before that time and then during that time, I was a nanny in France for a period of time. I was a holiday rep. I hitchhiked from the UK to Greece 1 year to work in Greek bars. I was a cleaner at 5 a.m. at Gatwick Airport. So you name it, I did it. And I think what's really important, along with the very substantial academic learning, is learning how to work with people and learning how to stretch yourself and learning to adapt. So plenty of those situations that I found myself in, I was on the edge of my comfort zone, and this is a long time ago because I'm an old person. So I'm talking about when did I go to uni? It's nearly 30 years ago that I went to uni. So things were different, right? You didn't have a smartphone, you didn't know where everything was. You had to really work things out as you went along. I learnt languages as well, which I think, whilst I haven't used them extensively at work, I think it's really helpful to understand other cultures and to, again, stretch your brain. It's hard communicating fluently in other languages if you haven't had that learning at home from your parents.
Sure. So do you still speak the languages, and which languages?
I'm not bad still at French, not bad. I would struggle to have a deeply technical conversation, but I can certainly get by. At the moment, I am killing myself trying to learn Spanish again on Duolingo. I'm not sure. I think it gets harder as it gets older, that's for sure, as you get older. And yeah, I can still understand a little bit German, a little bit of Italian. I've never done a language that is not in the same alphabet. I think that's maybe a stretch too far for me. But but yeah, so to go back to your question, how important was it? Super important. But as I say, as much was all of the other life experiences I tried to stitch together to make those few years as impactful as possible.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you made it sounds like you made the most of it. So the holiday rep and the bars in Greece probably are for another podcast, not this one. But I'm sure
there's plenty of stories. Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of stories that we could get into. So you said 5 years, and was that with a sandwich? And you had a year in industry, and what was that?
Yes, it was fascinating, but a helpful opportunity to learn what I wasn't good at in parallel. So I spent a year in a laboratory in France in a medical faculty, and it was absolutely incredible work. So that laboratory was, and today this is seen all over. But if you imagine the David Attenborough docos, where the tiny submarines go to the bottom of the ocean, and they find crazy animals and work out all of the chemistry and the activity down there, and what does it mean in terms of life in the universe. So the laboratory I was in had one of those submarines. Wow. And they were working on hoovering up weird stuff from volcanoes at the bottom of the seabed, which 25 years ago or more was seriously cutting edge. I was working in that laboratory with the biggest brains I'd ever met, but I learned very quickly that I'm not a natural in a laboratory. I'm quite clumsy, I'm quite impatient, and I was with a really good friend from the UK as well. We were studying together, and I think most weeks we broke something pretty bad and spent a lot of time trying to cover our steps and pretend that everything was fine. So but the study that I did there was interesting as well. I went to a riverbed to take mollusks when the tide had gone out, to take mollusks, and then we ground up the mollusks to test them for heavy metal pollution that was coming or perceived to be coming from tyres in road traffic, because there was a huge bridge that was running across this river, and also there was a big landfill across the other side. So it was a little bit of an exploratory piece to see where was the heavy metal coming from. Depending on what the metal was, you could determine its source. So it was a serious environmental study, and the results were fascinating, but the process of pressing buttons and beeping and pipetting things in a lab 8 hours a day, no, not for me.
For sure. Yeah. So then,
but yeah, great experience, and I would highly recommend always that if people go to uni, they take that year out and do something with business. So
for sure. So coming out of university, how clear were you that the infrastructure industry was where you wanted to go? Was that something that was known to you, or how did that come around?
Yeah, I think what I'd learnt was I preferred applied environmental scenarios versus theoretical or abstract. So, so the built environment for me was a nice, obvious one because we all use buildings, we all benefit from them. I had a few other options, and as I say, laboratories and the like, absolutely not for me. But I felt that I wanted to work in a field that benefited people very obviously. And yeah, so buildings worked really well for me, and I did 20 years in that space. So.
And I know you said that laboratories weren't for you, but you did, or you were part of some groundbreaking research in green buildings early on in your career. So I'm sure there were some synergies there. Could you tell us a bit more about that research and maybe the impact that it's had on the industry?
So I would say the synergies were staring at screens, looking at lots and lots of data. So it was monster spreadsheets and very, very late nights. But yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity. So not long into my career, so effectively I ended up quite quickly working in green buildings advisory space, whether that was supporting people to secure planning permissions or building certifications or specific technical targets across a portfolio and estate. But I realised really quickly that the technical advisors tended to be one step removed from those who were managing money. And it wasn't unheard of that I and all of my technical colleagues and design colleagues would produce wonderful reports that then the person with the budget or looking after the budget, so in construction that's the quantity surveyor on the part of the client, just didn't understand all of these technical scenarios that had been proposed. So they tended to draw a contingency line and say green stuff 10% extra, which then of course meant as soon as you needed to move into developing designs further and the inevitable value engineering that comes through that process, the green stuff would be deleted because we haven't got 10% extra money. So that annoyed me the first time that I experienced it. It annoyed me even more the second, third, fourth time. So I thought, right, we just need to crack this nut. And I was very fortunate to secure funding from a couple of large industry bodies. So one was the Investment Property Forum, which is the membership organisation for institutional investors, so largely pension funds and the like. And the other was the Carbon Trust, which was recently set up at that time. And so I was part of a team who were paid to basically work it out. If you're going to spend £1 on a building to make it greener, where do you spend that pound, and how quickly do you get your money back if that pound was additional to your original budget? And that if is really important because often it's not more expensive. So yeah, it was a really exciting time. But yeah, big eye bags, big spreadsheets. So.
And how do you see the relevant? I know you're not now working in the space, but where probably most people who do know you will have, or heard about you from your time at Mace. How relevant did you see that research you did back then during that time you're working directly?
Oh, it was mega. It was, yeah. So this is again a long time ago. This would have been maybe around. So it's before I joined Mace. I'm going to guess it was the mid-noughts, something like that. Mid to late noughts, and it was absolutely critical to informing government policy. So the energy ratings that are on buildings, A, B, C, D, E, this work informed governments' confidence to progress with mandating improvements. And the institutional investors absolutely ran at it. Once they had those benchmarking data sets, they gave the data to all of their agents and professional advisors to then go and see, well, look at our portfolio, which ones are going to be more at risk or better placed to be updated. I should say that a lot of the work I did covered both new builds and retrofits. Okay. So for institutional investments, their interest is typically in existing buildings more so. But it was a really exciting piece of my career, and I was really fortunate to be working with an A-game team.
For sure.
who are still A game. Yeah.
Great. And then, as I alluded to earlier, then you had 10 years at Mace, where I know we've discussed how you developed corporate strategy from something that was probably quite small and nascent at the beginning through to quite an expansive and significant sustainability team. I'm keen to understand here about some of the key strategies that you employed to really implement sustainability into the business, because I think that's something that you've become renowned for, is engaging with the business through sustainability. Could you talk to us a bit about that approach and perhaps some of the things you did?
Sure. I think, without question, the very fortunate opportunity I had at Mace is that a mega amount of their clients were really up for it. So I joined Mace in 2012, and the portfolio at the time included the London Olympics, the Shard, loads of British land developments, land securities. Microsoft was a big client, global client. So they were really advanced. Sky was another one that we ended up building their new headquarters. So these are clients that had a really strong vision, and they needed delivery teams, whether it was consultant or contracting teams, to deliver that vision. So I was very fortunate that I didn't really have to sell the principle to difficult stakeholders internally. Now, that's not to say there weren't plenty of difficult stakeholders. There were, but my primary stakeholders were CEO and a couple of the others of the owners who really wanted it. So they kind of greased that wheel for me, if you like, which was great. So I wasn't having to do too much of justify your existence and justify investment and justify growing a team, etc. So I was very fortunate in that regard. But I think the sort of key successes, if I look back, are I kept things really simple, had a very few number of targets and ambitions, but did them very, very well. I think certainly back then there was a tendency for large organisations to develop highly complex strategies that addressed every single one of the sustainable development goals, or whichever the framework that was being used at the time was, and it just became a bit impenetrable and dull. So and when you're trying to bring many thousands of colleagues along with you, and then many tens of thousands of partner colleagues through subcontractors or others, you just got to keep it really simple. And I'm sure this has been said 100 times before on these podcasts, but I think I did that well. I was also, again, I'm going to say similar to what I said on the client front, the Mace Marcoms team is phenomenal. So we had absolutely brilliant expertise there to help create simple messaging, great video content, through to white papers and major events. We hosted some incredible events that were really special. So again, I didn't have to do that myself, which I think sometimes can fall on the shoulders of sustainability practitioners. It's not very fair. That is a seriously specialist occupation to be able to do Marcoms well.
Sure.
So I was very lucky that I had that. I also invested in bespoke software that was Maceified, that worked for our business, and that became an absolute linchpin to. So I didn't do this, but I obviously worked with a specialist partner that knew how to do that. But I commissioned the principle of it, and that software then went on to be used by some of our clients, other contractors. We were very keen that it be shared rather than everyone else has to go through that pain, because it was quite a challenging process to go through. And the purpose of that software was to make it user-friendly, such that if you were, let's say you are a logistics subcontractor, you probably don't like using computers, you probably weren't taught particularly well how to do that, you may have not particularly developed levels of literacy, etc. You're highly competent at your job, but you don't necessarily have the best skill set to do the paperwork side of the job, and the auditing and the So securing all the ticketing and governance and information that needs to go with, you know, waste movement or whatever. We made the software super easy for everyone to use, which typically is not what is on offer with ESG reporting platforms. They are, in the large part, tiresome to work with, and they only work well for people that use them every day. So we invested well in that, which meant that we had a lot better engagement because people found it quite easy. And then if you've got all that data flow coming through and the reporting comes that much easier, it meant that my team weren't wasting all their time looking backwards, playing around with ancient data sets, trying to find either big holes in the data or big anomalies in the data, which again I found quite a lot of other teams were doing. And I am talking about, this would be 10 years ago or so, and things may have dramatically improved since then. But I think that was effective because this is an extremely long answer. I'm conscious of that. Hopefully you're still with me. But it meant that my team was empowered to get on with doing useful work rather than looking backwards work.
Sure.
So, and I think again that helped us accelerate that much faster. So in terms of it helping clients deliver what they wanted.
Absolutely. So, the transition from the built environment to the public transport sector is, on paper, a pretty big one. How have you found that? And I suppose, how did the previous experiences that you had prepare you for what you've had to experience in your current role?
So I was pretty neutral about where I would go next. I had just decided I wanted to do something different than built environment. I'd done 20 years, had a brilliant time, but I was starting, my role had become very much about people management. When I left, I think the team was 150 or so. I also had a hell of a lot of internal stakeholders to align with and work with and support. I had lots of clients, and so I was more so in a people space than I was in a delivery space or an ideas and creative space. So I felt that if I moved sideways in the built environment, I might well end up in a similar type of role, which I really enjoyed, but I just wanted a new challenge. So I guess what I was looking for were a couple of things in terms of new sector. So one was I didn't want to be revisiting before, not just the sector, but also the types of conversation that I was hearing. Two, I wanted the sector or the role to be much more obviously purpose-led. So construction and real estate is amazing, it's great, but there's a good proportion of it still that arguably is not needed. So there's still a lot of investment in big, shiny and new when actually maybe we could repurpose existing more readily. And that's not a reflection so much on any one company or any big personalities in the industry. There's quite a few real big ticket difficulties that I think are going to take at least another 10 years to unlock before some of those principles maybe disappear. As an example, it's a well-documented thing. You get VAT relief, tax relief on new builds. You don't on refurbishing. So, and that's something that's been lobbied for a long time in the industry, and it doesn't seem to land ever. So, so I knew that I wanted a more obvious purpose-led space, but I was pretty open to that. And I think public transport, I mean, it just is, isn't it? It's just nice. There's all it's doing is moving people around to be productive and purposeful, whether that's going to work or visiting friends or going on holiday, whatever it is. And every time someone takes a public transport journey, it's extremely likely that their carbon footprint is less than if they'd done it privately.
For sure.
So it's just a lovely thing. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing is I knew I wanted an industry where I could deliver results very quickly. So again, with construction and real estate, sometimes the time it takes from making a really bold decision through to actually seeing it implemented could be 5 years because of the nature of the process. You know, you've got probably 18 months, 2 years of design work. You might have a real long planning process. You've then got 2 or 3 years to build something. So I wanted a sector where I could create some magic a bit more quickly.
Sure.
And I can do that in public transport.
Understood.
I don't think I've answered your question.
No.
So, I've answered half of it.
So I suppose, that's the second part, but I was going to lead on to that is, so you built a wealth of experience in a sector, 20 years there, but you move into a new sector where you're you're joining in a senior role rather than before growing in the industry. How do you quickly understand those sustainability challenges, and what is material and what's the opportunities? What was your approach to getting that sort of 90-day plan, what did you do?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite simple. It's all about stop chuffing out diesel fumes. That's it. So replace diesel for zero emissions. So it's nice and simple in terms of learning. Do I know anything about how a bus works? Not really. So am I a mechanic? No. Can I absolutely help proceed at pace in terms of swapping out diesels for electric vehicles? We mostly have electric vehicles, a little bit of hydrogen, but 90% electric. I can do that in spades, because 1, it's infrastructure, so it's power connections, it's planning permissions, it's all that stuff that I know. 2, it's working with designers. 3, it's working with builders. 4, it's people and change, and helping those people that are going to be affected understand that change is good and that they should lean into it rather than try and push away from it.
Sure.
So actually, it's not been a difficult technical transition. I'm also really fortunate that I inherited an A-game team again. So I would hope that I've helped them become more A-game, but they were fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's, if you're surrounded by great people, then usually you should be able to achieve whatever you want, right?
Sure, because I was looking at, when you were explaining your responsibilities, I was thinking, given your experience and background, you'd have to rely on a good team to help you with that across property, construction, health and safety, security, government policy, all these areas. But even with a great team, how do you balance those, areas? Because some of them are, aligned, but there are some diverse areas there as well, to ensure that it's you're delivering on all the areas that you need to with a role like that.
So what's been great is probably, I wouldn't say every week has been different, but every month has been different since I've been here. I've done 2 years now. I think it's 2 years this week, actually. And I think, and so funnily enough, and I'm not sure when the podcast will go out, but for listeners, yesterday was the day that Rishi Sunak announced the election. So as an example, the government policy and partnerships team was already very busy readying themselves for the likely election later in the year, and now I will be supporting them in every possible way I can, such that we're in a good position to understand what opportunities or challenges a changing government might create for us, or worse, a hung parliament. But So I mean, the big chunky parts of my role absolutely is fleet decarbonisation. That is a big part of all day, every day. Property and real estate is spikier. So because of the nature of the milestones that you have in that space, so you'll develop a business case, you'll develop designs, you'll go for approvals, you'll then get your contractors on board. So it tends to be big lumpy events rather than every day that I'm involved in that. And the same on real estate. If we're buying or selling assets, that tends to be lumpy. So I just have to flex, really. Safety is obviously it's part of absolutely every day, but I have a fantastic 1 technical SME team, but 2 all of the operations and engineering functions are all over it. Sure. So my role tends to be much more ambassadorial in that space rather than needing to get into the technical grain of things.
Yeah, I suppose the role of the Chief Sustainability Officer is evolving, and it's not uncommon now for it to be double-hatted with another executive function, or actually the additional responsibilities that are coming under it are growing and widening because a lot of organisations are realising that CSO role is crucial to be part of the executive team. What's your view on the future of the role and the additional responsibilities that perhaps become integral to it, or that maybe have previously been part of it that you think maybe shouldn't be?
So I think that so I feel very strongly that you need to have relevance in your CSO role. You need to have relevance in terms of core business. So for me, I have budgetary responsibility for delivering that decarbonisation programme, which last year was a phenomenal sum of money, both first bus money, and also we were very fortunate to secure some DFT grants to enable some of the electrification process. So to have that responsibility to an absolutely critical element of business strategy, I think is A, a wonderful opportunity, but B, a massive responsibility. And I think whatever the business model is, or the product or services that business delivers, I think an element of it needs to be made, the CSO needs to be made accountable for that. I think where CSO roles can be a bit curious is where they are, it's not very kindly to say it, but there's kind of more of a standing on platforms, arm waving, saying, isn't this important? And perhaps with a view to being very investor focused or very media focused, and not really looking or taking responsibility for delivery of true change. So I do think there's something to be learnt there, because I'm not sure it's great for the CSO if all they're doing is reporting and talking. How are they learning and developing? I don't know. But also the board probably isn't getting the best from that person, because they are likely hugely intelligent, probably with some very interesting diverse thought, probably with a fantastic network of people and suppliers and partners that could be brought in to inform other activities. So yeah, I hope that CSO roles become a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Not that they're not big, but a bit broader. Maybe that's a better word. Broader. For
sure. Yeah. And I think as they become more of a key component of executive teams in all industry sectors, then that can be the case. But what's your approach to collaborating effectively with those other stakeholders as part of the executive team? As an example, when you joined the organisation, how did you approach that, and what was your view to gaining the support of the others that sat around that table?
I met them all before I joined. They were part of the process. So I think we're 7, so on the exec, and I think there was only one person I hadn't met before, because we couldn't get diaries to align. But I'd met them all. I went out for dinner a couple of times. I went to a couple of meetings to see how they work together. We also here, my colleagues have, well before I joined, have been very invested in profiling and working out how someone ticks and what they're going to be good at, bad at, where their vulnerabilities are, etc. So all of that profiling had taken place, so they could see how I was going to fit in and where my natural alliances might be, whether that's natural because we think and operate the same, or natural because we're the opposite and would be a great tag team.
Yeah.
So I think an awful lot of thought was put into whether or not I was a good personality fit as much as a good experience fit. So it's been quite a comfortable onboarding. And as I say, because decarb is such a critical element of the strategy, I'm not like this kind of outsider that's on the edge of conversations.
Sure. Because there are people that listen to this who are in organisations where perhaps members of that their executive team aren't as engaged or bought in. Maybe it's the organisation that they sit within, maybe it's that individual stakeholder who perhaps just has a particular viewpoint. If that's the case, going back to that point about integrating sustainability into business, how can you use that angle to ensure that you bring perhaps unaligned stakeholders on the journey with you to help drive this change?
I mean, I think I certainly had that at Mace. So I had fabulous support from CEO, chairman, and CFO, and then I had mixed support from others. And mixed was neutral and not ambivalent, but just not necessarily ever going to be an advocate, through to don't believe it, don't get it, or worse than that, have a lovely face here, and then the moment you leave the room, say the opposite, do the opposite.
Yeah.
So I've certainly experienced that in the past, and I think the two elements or two approaches that have served me well. One was to understand money, whether that is investment and cost attributed to change, sustainability stuff, or whether it's commercial value to be derived from that change. And I have made it my business, as I said earlier on, to understand that really early in my career. And I'm not perfect, and there's still tons I could do better and know better and understand more. But I think if you have got either the cost or the commercial lens and that voice in anything that you're presenting or positioning, it's extremely helpful, because you're not then, that technical expert that's never done real work and who's never had budgetary responsibility. Or if you have, you've had a corporate budget of, and it might be fairly substantial, it might be a couple of £1 million, but it's nothing relative to what the core business budgets and responsibilities are. So that's, I think, really important. And then the other thing that I think I've done very well always, I don't know if I've done it consciously or not, is my goodness, have I got 101 allies who don't always declare themselves. so it's always been useful to me, if I know that I'm about to face off to one of those difficult people, to tee up a few cozy chats in advance from people who will position what it is that I'm trying to do or change that I'm trying to create very, very well. But it'll be coming from someone whose job is, I don't know, accountancy, and so supposedly nothing to do with the world of sustainability. So I've always, I hope, made it a good stab at that, and had all of those kind of, that soft power, all those voices around me doing a lot of the work for me. So those stronger personalities maybe have been won over by someone that isn't me. I don't have an ego, it doesn't need to be me. So, yeah.
I think that's a really valid point, and something that back in my previous business we created what we called a Future Leaders mentoring program. I know there's lots like that out there, but it was a great platform for individuals who were on the rise of their career, who wanted to perhaps become an executive, to have what we called executive coaches to support them to do this. And I'll never forget one of the sessions. The key takeaway was they were talking about how to win over an executive team at the executive meeting or the board meeting, and the coach said, well, that's not the place that you win them over. You know, the place or the time you win them over is way before that. And all of because we ran these in cohorts, the 4 or 5 in the cohort, they couldn't quite understand what she meant. And when she kind of reiterated, the fact is, well, you know, the conversation should be happening a couple of months beforehand with not just them but with their team, and working out who that individual listens to more than anyone, and influencing that person to be able to use them as the way to influence the individual. And I think that was like a light bulb moment for a lot of those individuals to say, actually, I don't need to be the person who is the one to convince that individual. I can use somebody else on my behalf. And I think those softer skills are a really important facet now of the sustainability profession, which I think, going back to perhaps, you know, probably when you started and certainly when I started recruiting this space, was so much more about the technical skill set. And now it's so much less about the technical skill set and about that behavioural piece. What's your view of that?
100%. I think it's very practical to find technical excellence in another space. So you can, if you're client side as I am, you can buy it in. So through consultants or specialist providers, and I can, so long as you're able to brief them correctly and manage them correctly, you can get all of that technical competency from outside. You can also recruit directly in-house, obviously, but I think it's much the greater impact you can have is that influencing space, whether you're influencing policy or corporate targets, or whether you're influencing one individual that's going to unlock loads of opportunity and change. Doesn't really matter, but that it's investing as much time as you can in influencing and empowering and upskilling others. So
Sure.
so you're not trying to sort of fight this battle always as a unit of one.
Yeah, and as an I suppose as the sustainability leader within the executive team, something that we as a recruitment company ourselves think about a lot is around kind of attracting and retaining talent for organisations. How much of a conversation is that for you and your organisation around considering attracting and retaining talent that is passionate about sustainability or is passionate about this decarbonisation journey that your organisation is on? Because I suppose if you can get people that really buy into that, then money and other things perhaps become less important to them, but actually being part of this cause is what keeps them there. How have you seen that play out?
Yeah, so I think definitely at Mace it was a huge part of how we attracted and retained people. So there were various means of how we could measure that, and one of the stats I was most proud of there was, I think it was since 2017, sustainability, and it still is today, was the most searched for term on the website. And there were two groups of people that were doing that searching. One was clients, and through the digital analytics you could see the @email account, not the individual. One was clients and one was incoming recruits, and it was absolutely critical to the recruitment and growth ambition of Mace for sustainability to be an added value. That's a horrible term, but a differentiator, that's better. And seemed to be a genuine proposition as well, versus here's some nice words but we don't actually ever do any of this stuff. So here, I've only been here 2 years, and the workforce is very different than at Mace. So Mace was white collar, can't remember now, maybe 7,000-8,000 people, something like that, but largely office based and largely degree educated. Here at First Bus, our colleague workforce is largely drivers. So they are 90% of the workforce. The other 10% is mostly engineers, and then there is an office-based community as well, like me. What has been really lovely to see is we've now got fantastic feedback from drivers who are driving electric vehicles rather than diesel, and it is 100% positive. And the quotes say, "Oh my goodness, my day has been so much improved by driving an electric bus rather than diesel bus. They're quieter, they're easier, they're smoother to drive, they don't rattle, they don't get hot like a diesel engine does." There are a couple of more difficult elements, one of which is that you can hear all your customers' conversations, which previously you couldn't, and some of those conversations are great and some of them you really don't want to hear. So it's not perfect, but it is largely really positive, and that for me has been superb to hear, because that's who matters. Without them, this company is absolutely nothing, and to know that we are, through this program of investment, are improving their days is great. The same is true of customer experience. The vast majority of customers are extremely happy. So yeah, I think, will it come through in a driver's recruitment process? Are they going to say, "I want to work for you because you've got electric vehicles"? I think soon. Yeah. I really think it might. At the moment, only 15% of our fleet is electric. So it'll be in those specific locations. But a couple of years from now, when we've doubled that, yeah, it really could be start of the different, a notable differentiator
for sure.
And certainly in the office, the central teams and the specialist central teams, we're seeing it a lot now already. So that that it's seen as a point of differentiation.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see that as a, as a driver. If you've got two organisations that you're looking at, and one is requiring you to drive an old diesel, and one's a new electric, that's a big thing that you would clearly choose the electric vehicle. So I think that can really help boost the attraction and then the retention, which is great. Okay, a few other questions I have. One is around the qualities and mindsets that you believe are essential for not just the sustainability leader, but also just the organizational leaders to have to drive this sustainable innovation and transformation in amongst everything else that we have to deal with in today's business landscape. What would be some of the key qualities or mindsets that you would suggest?
So I don't think I'm going to say anything too groundbreaking here. One is everyone's got to be aligned. That's it. You're aligned. You're supportive of each other. You all agree that the investment strategy or the technical solution or the new people plan is the right approach. Because I think when leaders don't agree, and certainly if they don't agree and the colleagues get to see that published position says X and then leader is saying Y, is horrific and really unhelpful and disruptive. So I think that's, again, I've landed make your own luck, I hope, but I've landed in an exec that is absolutely aligned on this. And so I was the penultimate, it's quite a new exec. So my boss, Jeanette, I think has done 3.5 years, and she has brought each person in to support her in the exec. And I think I was the penultimate one, the chief growth colleague. He joined maybe a year ago. So she's done a lot of work to make sure that we're all aligned, and I think that's really powerful. I think it's evident whenever we're out and about that this isn't like a bit of green fluff that we wheel out when we're talking to investors, and that we don't bother to talk about when we're talking with drivers or with customers. So that's been super helpful. I think from a personal perspective, I think a key quality is, I don't know whether I'd call it belligerence quite, but it's resilience, that's for sure. so whatever setbacks come, that sort of land in your lap, and they do, you just keep going. You keep going. There will be a solution. You keep going. And I mean, the 2 years I've done here, the nightmare, both in terms of the effect on people, but effect on the economy of the Russia-Ukraine war, was really dramatic in a company where diesel is one of your biggest costs. And the sudden impact of the Russian attacks in Ukraine and the global energy markets, that was so challenging for so many businesses. And I was very new in role then, but the way in which this team and all of the SMEs that work around us, whether it's in finance or procurement or other, made sure that we were in the right place and that we weren't detrimentally broken by that huge cost increase, was really impressive. So I think that ability to come together and problem solve together when you have the bad days, as well as being able to celebrate the good days, is really important. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
I don't know if that's enough aligned with sustainability for you, but yeah, I do think those are pretty important attributes.
For sure. But I think the point that I hear from that is that good leadership probably will result in good sustainability. Having that team and having the ability to deal with these setbacks, whatever they are, is probably an indicator of how you will deal with that situation. And sustainability is so it's integrated into everything. So actually, if you're not leading well, you're definitely not going to be leading it from a sustainability perspective very well. So we certainly see that. And what about people that are perhaps on the earlier journey of their career in sustainability and the thinking about how to grow, how to climb the ladder, or even just starting their careers. What advice or guidance would you give to them about how to plan this career pathway out?
So I think a big one for me is going back to what I said right at the beginning about it's just as important to learn what you're not good at and what you don't like as it is to learn what you are good at and what you like. So I think it's really important to move around. I think there's so much emphasis on, for example, graduate recruitment, and graduates got to stay for 10 years. No, they don't. No, they don't. Let them have their space and blossom. And okay, so some companies might be able to create 6 different opportunities over the course of that 10 years, but generally it's very difficult to do that. I think it's much more important that you go work for a big company. Let's say you work for a big PLC, you understand what that feels like. You then work for a 100-person company. You then maybe try a period in a delivery organization, and then you try a period in a kind of more desk-based organization. I think that's what matters most, is trying to understand what is the culture and the working styles that suit you well. So me, as an example, I am very driven by delivery. I know from direct experience, but also just as I've got older, I think it's very unlikely at any point in my life I'm going to end up in a policy making space. No, I just I haven't got that skill set. I can't convene 100 people who want the opposite and take 3 years to agree super important adjustments to policy or targets, but that's just not my skill set. So I learned quite quickly through moving around that, yeah, I'm excited by delivery. I like to see that, oh, I did that. Not me as an individual, but as part of a team.
Sure.
And I think that's important. Don't be fearful of, you do a year in role and you've worked out it's not quite right. It's much better to talk to your boss and say, this isn't quite right. I think I probably need to go somewhere else, but I'd like to make the exit process as comfortable as possible. What's really rubbish, I think lots of younger or less experienced people, and I did it myself, is that you get grumpy, you don't really know how to explain this isn't either quite as advertised, or you're being pushed too hard on hours, or you really want to go into team yellow but you're in team green and you're not allowed to because of internal politics. It's really difficult for you to have those conversations. So then what happens is you resign and you give 4 weeks notice and you jack, and everyone's in a real bad mood because they didn't see it coming for whatever reason, and then it means that the team that you're leaving behind is compromised because they've got to do your work for at least 3 months while you're looking to backfill with a new person. So I think there's something about trying to have those honest conversations in those first few years, because it's okay to move around. It's so unlikely you're going to land in the perfect place and be there for 6, 8, 10 years. So, but I know that probably HR teams wouldn't agree with that, and also the impact on the cost of developing the next person that comes in, etc. There's definitely a balance to be had. But I do think for younger people to move around a bit more is okay if your mid-grade and more senior people are more established and then are also moving around all the time, so your turnover is horrific across the whole of your staff profile.
Yes.
So so I think that's a big one for me.
For sure.
Is that helpful?
Absolutely. And I think the other part of it is that by doing that you get to see what's the viewpoint of sustainability in different organizations, and the different maturities as well, and how to deal with organizations where everybody is aligned and on board, like it sounds like you've had with your organizations in the most part, or organizations where actually it's really hard. And that point of being resilient, I think, is so crucial within sustainability, and having a positive outlook, because I do speak to lots of sustainability individuals on their journey who they're exhausted. They feel burnt out. They feel like they're banging their heads against a brick wall, and I empathise with them. But also, I understand that maybe it might be the way that they're approaching it. It might be that they haven't unlocked that thing that they need to within the organisation to drive it through. Because it's very rare I think now to really find people who are going to be absolutely opposed to it, but it's just, can you put it in their context to make them understand, to allow them to support you to what you need to do, and that can be quite challenging. So if you get the experience of doing that, then you probably learn from it, and you can take that forward to the next organisation where you might be able to perform it a bit better. Great.
Agree.
So I've got a couple of quick fire questions, if that's okay with you, that I'd like to hear.
Yeah, none of my responses have been quick so far. I'll give it a go.
Sure.
Try and answer in less than 20 words.
So how do you stay updated on the latest trends and developments in sustainability?
So I'm quite lazy, so I like a podcast. So I like to just listen and have someone tell me in a very manageable way what's happening out there. I'm not someone that's going crazy for reading big technical informations, or I wish conferences were more interesting. I think there's a fear often in most conferences and public speaking events where, even if it's Chatham House rules, a lot of what's being said has been said 1,000 times before, and it's not very sensitive or groundbreaking. So I do like podcasts a lot. I listen to my peers as well. I'll always take recommendations, and I will always take an introduction from my peers. If you've met someone cool or an interesting product, or I'm a bit of a butterfly. So
with
flit about, and if you land on enough things, then one of them's going to work, right?
Sure. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And of course, other than the Better Than We Found It podcast, which I'm sure you're an avid listener, are there other podcasts that you would name that people should check out?
Yeah. So I think, maybe I shouldn't fess up, but I like the more light-hearted stuff. So where you kind of don't realise you're learning. So there's one that finished not that long ago called Sustainababble that I used to love. So they did hundreds of episodes, but I found that a really good blend of technical chat and detail together with just a load of silliness. The current version of that, I'd say, is John Richardson and the Futurenauts. So they don't only cover sustainability; it's all things, all elements of society they cover, but there's an awful lot of it is environment and social purpose. That's really good fun. I try and put on my serious head and listen to BBC more sort of sensible stuff, or if I'm feeling really brave, I'll do something like Wake Up to Money. I don't listen to it live at 5 a.m, but I listen to the podcast.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess I like a little bit of silliness along the way. So
sure. Yeah, I think it's good to have good fun when you're listening to podcasts, and if it's too serious, then actually it's not sometimes so easy to digest. You have to sort of sit there with a pen and write it down. So I find that.
Yeah, I did very much enjoy one that Deborah Meaden did. But it's only one series, or a couple of series, I think. Again, it finished a little while ago. I think that was called The Green Money Show, and it was her.
I heard about.
And it was her, and her co-presenter was one of the presenters from Wake Up to Money. So, and I thought that was a really fantastic. The breadth of what they covered in terms of topics was great, but also the level at which they communicated. I think it probably hit absolutely perfectly with people who have very limited knowledge through to people that are kind of long established experts.
For sure.
Great.
Understood. And I know you said that you're not one for reading lots of big technical resources, but is there a book or a place or resource that you read that's perhaps altered or influenced your approach to sustainability?
No, I wouldn't say so. I love that there are really fabulous books like Outrage and Optimism. By what's her name, Christiana Figueres. So amazing. Does it change my approach? No. Does it continue to reassure me that this is what we should be doing? Yes. Yeah.
Great. And who inspires you in the field of sustainability, and why?
So I'm going to go really boring and say that my original inspiration was David. So, David Attenborough. So, I am the original eco warrior that loves the natural environment. I have breathed the same air as David twice. I have got within a few meters of him, but I've never actually shook his hand. So, but yeah, so I guess without being kind of very dull and revering him, national treasures, etc., I think it's absolutely remarkable that in his 90s he is still pumping out absolutely A game content and motivating and inspiring goodness knows how many tens of millions, if not hundreds and billions of people. So I'm never going to be as cool as him, obviously. But I think I don't know that I'd name specific individuals. I think there have been really strong business leaders like Paul Pullman. I think that was him at Unilever. I used to love listening to him speak. I think business leaders who've got that natural gift to talk about what can be quite a dry subject in a really compelling way, such that the whole room is just leaning in and putting that human factors into it, explaining things from a perspective of people rather than tons of carbon. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. I listened to Paul Pullman at the PEI Responsible Investment Forum last year, and absolutely was that the room was packed, and you could hear a pin drop when everybody was, really just, and it was a room of finance people. They were not talking about environmentalists here. We're talking about finance people, but who understand the impact that he had as leading with purpose. And I think that's such an important part of the modern day CEO now, is to understand that and to connect with your people through something like sustainability. And I think that's a great segue into my final question, which is around your own purpose and your own legacy. So, by the end of your career, what would you like to have achieved, or to have known that you've done to show that you've left the world better than you found it?
So, I am very lucky. My whole career, I have created physical things. So it's very easy to see buildings or, public realm that I was part of making it greener. And the same is true of the buses now. I can see electric buses all over the UK that definitely my paw print is on why they are there, what made them, how we managed to get them there, whether it's business case or managing the construction process or whatever. So that is super exciting, and I will definitely be able to go at the end of my days say, I did something, I made it better. But I would say more importantly, I really, really hope, and this is something that's much more subjective, I really hope that I have inspired a whole bunch of other people to get on and join him. And not just those technical practitioners, so sustainability folk that I've met along the way, but all of those people who, it's not their day job, it's not, they don't have to integrate all these things into their home life, but they've done it. They've made some changes, and they've been part of the solution. So that one, I don't know that I could measure that. I should have put a little tattoo on everyone I ever met.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that one, I hope is there.
Sure.
I hope is there.
Yeah.
In a big blob. So.
For sure, you can do maybe a survey monkey at the end of your days to them all and ask them.
Did you ever meet her? And did you ever change?
For sure. Well, look, I'm sure even from this conversation, there'll be lots of individuals who are inspired by what you've done, and particularly those perhaps in transport and transportation, if they are keen to reach out and hear more about what you're doing, or perhaps to learn about what First Bus are doing to take to their own organisations. Would you be happy to connect with and engage with individuals that might want to reach out? And if they,
of course. Do, I mean, I wouldn't limit it to transport because I don't know that much about transport. But just in terms of getting stuff done, I'll talk to anyone. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. What's the best route for people to try to get in contact with you if they're interested?
I'm on LinkedIn, so probably through LinkedIn is the best. I keep a little eye on that all the time.
Great.
So.
Good stuff. Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure that we tag that into the show notes. But look, thank you so much for the conversation. It's been really great to hear the whole story and what you're doing, and inspirational for the UK travel system. And certainly when I next see a first bus that's electric, I'll be thinking of you. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been great to have you on, and I look forward to hearing how things progress over the next year or so. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Better Than We Found It. I hope you have found value from this to support your own purpose-led journey. This episode was brought to you by GS2 Partnership, my organisation focused on providing talent solutions for sustainably focused organisations. We are driven by our purpose of connecting the people who believe in leaving the world better than we found it. If you are looking for a partner to support you with your hiring plans, or you are looking for your own career next steps, please reach out to us or personally drop me a message on LinkedIn. It's great to hear from listeners to the podcast, and I'd welcome the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for our next episode.